I find your study of bugs to be very fascinating. Like, I do not like bugs at all. So when I find someone who really enjoys bugs, that is very, very interesting to me. So
It's a different world.
yeah, yeah. How does someone get into studying bugs? What does that look like?
I think it first starts with observing and noticing insects or bugs, um, which means you can't just squish them on impact. But once you start looking at insects, you realize there's something really interesting here. You start noticing things and watching how they move. And for me, that started from a very young age. I can't even remember the first time I thought insects were interesting, because just the way I was raised, my mom did not squish insects on site. And when we would find something interesting, we'd look at it, and we had a little field guide. So we would look up what it was and learn about it. So the interest was fostered by my mom, and learning, which if you're learning about something, it's automatically somewhat interesting at least. And you just go from there. You just keep observing and noticing things, and you keep learning, and it just snowballs.
Nice. And then from that initial fascination with bugs, how did you go from kind of the backyard exploration to the more advanced stuff that you do now?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I think I had let my interest in insects grow to a point that I knew that I wanted to study a little bit in college about insects. And so I got my minor in entomology at university. And directly after, or before I graduated and directly after graduating, I worked in an insect lab. So I was a lab technician. So I did a variety of things as a lab technician. Um, the collection in that museum, as it was called, was quite extensive, several million insect specimens. And I had a variety of tasks while I worked there. Um, a large percentage of my time was spent pinning insects, which means taking an insect from, say, a vial of liquid and drying it off, pinning it using special insect pins, and then making a formal label of data where the insect was collected, such as state, county, a more precise location, even GPS coordinates, how it was collected, such as in a net or a trap, or even just found randomly, and then who the collector was. So all that data goes on your label. So I spent a large amount of time pinning insects and putting their labels on them and putting them into the collection so that they could be used if a researcher wanted to come and see that kind of insect. Um, while I was there, I also helped with a grad student's project. He was actually collecting data on mountain lion kills and seeing what kinds of beetles were attracted to the kills from these pumas. Um, so he was into big cats. So he needed someone to be able to identify beetles. So I took his specimens and identified as closely as I could all of his beetles, um, to give him a good idea of what was coming to his the traps by his kill sites. While I was working at the lab, I also was able to do a few summers worth of field work, which means I would load up a truck with supplies and basically go on a road trip slash camping for probably about 3 to 5 days is what it usually was. And along the way, I would find good areas to set up beetle traps. And the beetle traps use chemical lures to attract beetles. And the samples collected from these traps, I would later process in the lab and just kind of clean them up, pin them. So I was able to do a few summers worth of setting traps out and collecting the samples. Trying to think what else I did while I was at the lab. Some data entry, random stuff, but overall just a lot of pinning insects. And because I was able to pin so many insects while I worked there, I've seen samples from honestly all around the world. A lot of these samples were collected by my boss or fellow coworkers, and then obviously brought back to the lab. And because I was a lab tech and not a grad student, I had the time to go and mindlessly pin these insects. Now this is like, 8 hours a day of pinning insects for a long time. So tedious, but also very fascinating because I'm looking under the microscope at all of these things, seeing things close up. I was going to tell you about a book that if you're interested in being interested about insects, there's a book, I believe it's called Bugs Up Close. It's a large hardback book with just these macro images of insects. And you get to see the crazy details on these things, which just blows my mind how detailed they are and how beautiful they are under magnification. So if you're interested in being interested in insects, I recommend that resource or similar resources that you could probably just Google macro photos of insects online, and that would be sufficient if you only had 2 minutes to look stuff up. So I hope that was kind of a long-winded answer to your question. Hopefully that was sufficient.
Yeah. So you go from studying insects to your backyard, and then you go minor for them in college. And while you're doing that in college in your lab, you go out on these camping trips and you're helping students with papers, you're finding bugs, you're pinning them down, and you're observing them. Is that more or less what you were doing? Or
yeah, that really sums it up. Yeah, I worked at this lab and helped with the collection. And I know the big piece that I forgot. So when I was finishing up college and starting working at the lab full time, I was working on the lab's dragonfly and damselfly collection, which were largely not processed yet. They were not curated. They were in the lab, but they were not part of the museum, if that makes sense. So if someone came to study in dragonflies, they weren't really able to, because most of the dragonflies were just not pinned and labeled. And so I took all of these dragonflies and damselflies, identified them to species level, and then printed out their data labels. And actually, dragonflies and damselflies don't typically get pinned because that would take up too much space. So they actually get laid flat inside of little clear plastic envelopes on their index card with the data. So I identified all these specimens and curated them and was able to incorporate them into the collection. So now, if you were to go to this lab and wanted to see all the dragonflies, you would be able to see them and see the collection data. That was the other big piece that I started out doing while at the lab.
Interesting. So what's the process in pinning bugs down to this book? Like how do you go about doing that? And then what is the purpose of finding all these bugs and pinning them down for people to see?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so when someone has either a personal insect collection or an insect collection at a university or a museum, they have many specimens of, say, one kind. And if you were researching a specific type of insect, what you would do is you would go to these collections, or you could actually have a loan and they can mail them to you. But you would get a hold and see these collections, and you would be able to look at all the species or all of the individuals and maybe pick out differences and just see like the range of differences. You know how people like say 25-year-old men, there's differences between every 25-year-old man. You can still tell it's a young man, but everybody has different hair color, maybe different eye color, different proportions. And so when you're looking at a large group of insects of the same kind, you're going to see that as well. You're going to see slight variations of maybe size or maybe color. Maybe the spots are a little bigger on one, or the stripes are a little bit slimmer on another. So if you were going to study some insects in a collection, you could notice differences, and sometimes the differences amount to being a new species or a new subspecies, in which case that's how often new species are discovered, is already a dead insect in a collection. Could be a new species that hasn't been formally described yet for the scientific community. You could also be looking at just range data for a collection. Say someone had 100 different individuals of this one beetle at a museum collection, and you wanted to chart on a map where all of these things were caught. That could give you a good idea of their range. I mean, barring that they weren't collected by all one individual at one time and one place. But so you can learn a lot of things from already collected insects that are in display. Or I should not say display, because that makes it sound like they're literally on display, but insects that are pinned in a collection. Yeah.
Cool. And can you explain like species and subspecies? What is, I don't quite know what that is.
Sure, yeah. So a species is, I probably should just read the Google definition, but a species is, like there are dogs, that's a species. There are robins, that's a species. And for insects, similarly, there are species of an insect that the individuals can breed with each other and make more of that one species. Now, a subspecies is still that species, but often there's like some slight differences, maybe across like regionally, that maybe they're a little bit of different color or some other very slight difference. Let me look up the definition, because I am not sure if subspecies, I would think that they could create hybrids within each other. I'm going to guess that if they could not breed together, then that would be a different species. Let me look up that definition. Usually a geographically isolated race. So still the same species of something, but usually maybe they're just geographically isolated is what it looks like. They're a little bit physically and genetically different from the rest of the group. So subspecies are tricky because a lot of the times experts in taxonomy will often disagree. And it actually takes quite a bit of studying and arguing and disagreeing and researching to figure out how to place an animal taxonomically and give it a name that really gives it a good place. Putting it near
Taxonomically?
yeah, so things are given taxonomic names just so that scientists can know what is similar to other things. Um, so have you heard of,
Is
go ahead.
taxonomy the study of differences between species, or
Taxonomy, let me look up your formal definition here. So taxonomy is a branch of science concerned with classification of organisms. So a taxonomic binomial name has two names. So for us, we have a first name and a last name. For animals, plants, animals, they're given two names. The first name is the genus, and the second name is the species. So the first name is a genus, which is, you know what, think of it as the reverse of our first names and surnames. So like you have other family members who all share your last name, but you're the only one with your first name. So for a taxonomic name, it's the other way around. The genus is, say, the bigger group, and the species is the one that designates that, I'm going to say individual, the individuals of that species. I hope that analogy, that comparison made sense. Yeah, so taxonomy, you're just classifying things, showing what is similar to other things. So at a higher level, birds are all in a group and insects are all in a group, and those groups are separated by a different name. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So sort of like you have beetles, and then that would be your genus, and then the species would be like a dung beetle versus a roach, and then kind of below those you might have like the flying roach and the non-flying roach, and the, I don't know if there's different, like maybe a flying dung beetle and not. So is that kind of what it is, or?
I think you have the right idea. Yeah, so say your larger group is insects, and then under that maybe just pick out beetles, and maybe just under that pick out just what we call scarab beetles, and maybe within the scarab beetles pick out just dung beetles. And so maybe a certain kind of dung beetle would be, say, your genus, and then within that type of dung beetle you could pick out a species. So it gets very narrow, going from the kingdom down to the family, and then the genus and species. So you're just being very precise with what you are describing that you have. Say you have one beetle in front of you, it has a taxonomic name, and that name, while it may only be 2 words, it does give the scientist information about all of the higher up levels, because if it's a beetle, it's not going to be in a group of mammals that have a different name.
And so taxonomology?
Taxonomy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Taxonomy would just be the,
you're just labeling things.
Okay. So just figuring out the labels for bugs.
Yeah. It's really that. You're figuring out what is similar to what and giving them labels.
Huh. Cool. And your job is to pin all these bugs into these books so that the taxonologists can observe them and classify them properly. Is that good?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I pinned many insects, and I was able to put them at least to the family level of classification into the collections, and then presumably an expert would go from there and sort them out. But yeah, taxonomists would look at all these things and study them for whatever purpose they were studying them.
Cool. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned you went on all these different camp outs. You found all these different
Mhm.
bugs. Was there ever a camp out that was you were most excited to be on, or it was just an exciting camp out to be, maybe a very memorable one?
Yeah, I do have a very memorable one. I drove 1,600 miles in 5 days. It covered basically a giant loop of the entire western half of Montana. So I went from the very almost southern point of Montana up through the very western side of Montana, up to the very northwestern side of Montana, cut across the northern border of Montana, um, probably about a third of the way through the state, definitely not halfway through the state, out to the middle of nowhere, and then drove back south to my starting point. So that's a lot of driving in 5 days. And along the way, I set up these traps, and I got to do this route again at least one other time to maintain the traps. And I think I must have done it a third time to take the traps down. But yeah, it was a very fun trip. Got to see so much land, and it was a blast.
What was the most exciting part of the trip for you?
Oh, I just love driving dirt roads out in the middle of nowhere. It's too fun.
Nice. That's awesome. So you pin all these bugs, you find all these bugs, and you document them in this big book. What can we learn about bugs in this process that you use?
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking me.
Uh,
Um,
is maybe a better way of saying this is, what can we learn, how can the studying of bugs benefit humans?
oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So bugs are vital to the ecosystem. Lots and lots of animals eat insects as either their primary source of food or maybe a large supplement part of their diet. Insects are vital for pollination of flowering plants. Insects really touch all parts of the ecosystem. So by studying insects, you can learn quite a lot about maybe how they impact certain trees or certain animals, crops. It's pretty important to understand insects, pests when it comes to agriculture, whether the insects are harmful or even helpful, and then how to best control insect pests as far as agriculture is concerned. I have not researched it, but I know insects definitely would have a big impact on human lives, such as whether they're pests to crops or pests to homes, such as termites. Bees often come up as a big issue that most people know about, but most people don't know that honeybees are not native. They are from Europe. And while they are important, people don't realize how important native pollinators are. Most people don't know any native pollinators. Most people don't know that there are lots of species of bumblebees and just lots of kinds of solitary bees that do pollinate people's gardens and even crops. So I think it would actually be hard to find an area that insects didn't influence as far as human lives and activities.
You mentioned there that a lot of people don't know the differences between pollinators. Can you explain the pollination process, how bugs play a role in that?
Yeah, so a lot of plants have pollen, which is basically the I'm going to say the seed needed to make more seeds between plants, and plants rely on insects to distribute the pollen between themselves. Not all plants, but many plants use pollinators. Um, and this helps plants genetically so that they're not all inbred. and lots and lots of insects are pollinators, and people don't realize that there's more than just European honeybees.
European honeybees. Would that be just right, like the sort of the honeybees you see here in America? And then are there other
Yeah.
like Asian honeybees or like
Oh, I
African
don't know.
honeybees and stuff? Or
There are bees from other continents for sure, but yes, the bees that you typically see out and about are probably just regular old honeybees, which are not native to the United States, to North America. Yeah, I think people don't realize that it's the native bees that should have some concern about them.
hmm.
I'm not sure how many people know that.
Gotcha. Nice. Are there any discoveries in entomology that are really exciting you at the moment?
Yeah, let's see. You asked me that, and I wrote down something. Um, yeah, so I mentioned earlier that new species are discovered all the time, already collected in collections. So these insects are already dead in collections worldwide. So any collection around the world could potentially have a new species in it that has not been formally described for science. So insects are collected in large numbers typically, and it takes significant time to curate all of these insects into collections. And then that's let alone having an expert come along wanting to see a certain type of insect and study it. And if an expert did come along and want to study whatever that kind was, they might find differences amounting to describing a new species. So there's always new species being discovered. Personally, I really love the fact that apps you can download on your phone can identify any animal or plant, including insects, usually fairly accurately. So if you have a phone, you can download apps such as iNaturalist, and all of these observations that people upload and record, all these observations are online for anyone to access. And this is real life data. This isn't any guessing. This is what people have found. So that can fill in gaps in our knowledge about insects, such as range distribution. Say someone found a particular insect, and on, say, an app like iNaturalist, you could look up where all of this type of insect was found on the map, and it'll have like areas of high concentration and low concentration. You can see kind of the distribution. And so this is data given by just average everyday people. This is not scientists people studying a particular thing trying to guess or find all this information themselves. This is just supplied by people like you and me. So I think it's really cool that everyone can contribute to this and that these apps are quite good at identifying what you've found. Say you find a bug in your windowsill, take a picture of it, make your observation on an app such as iNaturalist, and submit it, and boom, there's an observation. And if you don't really know what you have there, other people will chime in because they maybe have studied enough to have a good guess of what you've got there. And if enough people, I think usually only two, but if enough people say you have such and such type of insect, it becomes what's called research grade. And then that's a pretty solid guess on what that animal is. And it can be used for, I guess, research, knowing what you have and where it came from. Even seasonality data, so like seeing when throughout the year certain insects are active. So yeah, so lots of new species are discovered all the time, already in collections, already dead in collections. And I think it's really great that people can use apps to identify insects. It's a very cool piece of technology.
Is there a bug that you like are particularly interested in, or maybe a new species that was recently discovered that you're like, whoa, this is really cool?
So when I worked at the lab, pretty much everyone working around me was working on beetles. And so I would say that's my favorite, just general beetles. Although I do think beetles are really cool looking, just the way their anatomy is and their shapes and colors. And I do have some partialities within beetles. There's a few kinds that I am partial to, but I'm still not going to narrow that down because that's still probably half a dozen different families of beetles. There's just so many cool ones out there. I can't pick one favorite.
Was there any that came in that were like particularly unique? Maybe one that was, I don't know, yellow or something, or just some obscure color, or maybe
Definitely
had some feature on it.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was working in the lab, that was up in Montana, and Montana is cold most of the year, and most insects are not overly bright and colorful, but there were still some things that were very pretty to look at. There's some kinds of beetles that were metallic green, so those are exciting. However, most of the beetles that probably you're hoping to hear about were from tropical regions. There were beetles from Mexico that, I kid you not, were glittery. You thought glitter was a man-made invention. No, I don't think so. Gotta tell you that first. And I mean, you can find any color in an insect around the world. If you want pink ones, they're out there. If you want yellow ones, they're out there. If you want purple or red or blue, there's beetles or other insects that have all these colors. So I did get to see some pretty cool stuff that came in samples from around the world.
Was there any ones that particularly stood out to you?
I remember one that was collected in Montana, and it was a rare thing, and it had like hot pink on its sides. And for the life of me, I've looked it up multiple times trying to figure out what that thing was. I still haven't found out.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't remembered the name of it to look it up properly, and I know what family of beetles it's in, but past that, I'm unsure of what to look up to try to find it. But yeah, I've been racking my brain for like 10 years.
Wow. You see this beetle with pink stripes, and then you just can't find it. That's got to be like the most frustrating
Oh,
thing ever.
maddening. Yeah. Because the people I was with, the guy who found it, he knew what it was.
Hmm.
This guy has really extensively collected insects. And so he knows what he's looking at. So he knew what it was, and he said the name, and we're trying to dig out that chunk of my brain ever since.
Where have you been able to find out about it?
What have I been able to find out?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what family of beetles it's in. That's about it.
Hmm. What family of beetles was that?
It's in the ground beetles called Carabidae.
Hmm. Can you break down like what are the different variations of beetle and the different families and genomes and all that?
There's lots of different families of beetles. I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head, but yeah, the different families of beetles, honestly, they're often easy to identify just based on like the shape of the overall body of the beetle. So obviously some are quite tricky, very, very tricky, but um, a lot of beetles do share a similar shape. So all of the ground beetles share kind of a similar shape. All of the scarab beetles kind of share a similar shape. Picture the beetles that are on Egyptian artifacts. That's a typical shape of a scarab beetle. Um, yeah, there's lots of families of beetles. I want to say around 1 or 2 dozen. Don't quote me on that, but there are lots.
Huh. What are some of the identifying characteristics of a ground and the scarab beetle?
I'll just say that between families of beetles, what you're going to look at are a variety of factors. A lot of it comes down to things that you're going to be looking at under a microscope, um, such as the number of tarsi on certain legs, the number of plates on the abdomen, the underside of the abdomen, where certain appendages attach, like where the antenna are attached, where what the antennae are shaped like, how many segments are in the antennae. There's quite a variety of factors that will get you to figuring out what you have, whether you have a guess just by looking at it, going through actually figuring out what you have. You might be surprised at what you find.
Huh. Interesting. So it's would a good what separates the different variations of beetle would be their legs, their body shapes, how their segments of their bodies connect to each other, and then length of antenna. And can you? I've never heard of like different sections of antenna. What is the? Can you explain sort of the different? What do the different sections do? And
Sure, yeah. So if you looked up maybe in a book or on Google, insect antennae, antennas of insects, what you would see is drawings or photos of different, or look up ones for beetles in this instance, and you'll see that they're shaped differently across different families or genera or species. And sometimes the antennae will have different numbers of segments, or the segments will be different shaped. So based on what the antennae are like, that is one clue to figure out what kind of beetle you have.
so it's just like shapes of it, pretty much. So like what the base looks like and the tip looks like. There's not like the different segments aren't for like finding various types of food. It's just how they look, more or less?
You're getting a little past what I did while I was in the lab, but there are beetles that use their antennae for different things, whether that is receiving pheromones, chemicals that tell them about their environment, or there is a certain type of beetle that have some pretty unusual antenna. Trying to remember the name of it. It has a real odd name. The ones I saw were from Africa. They had very strange antennae that were like scoops almost. And so I don't know if those were related to digging in the dirt because they were predators of ants. So I think maybe they could have been used for some purpose and relating to being in ant colonies. But yeah, I don't know all of the different purposes of antennae, but they have antennae, so there's a purpose. I just got to figure out what it is.
Gotcha. Interesting. I'll have to look more into that. That's pretty cool. What do you think is the most surprising thing people don't know about insects?
I think people would be surprised at how many species of insects there are and how much of the biomass on Earth is insects. Um, I Googled it. Google says over 1 million species of insects are formally described. But there could be as many as 2 to 30 million species of insects on Earth. Most experts estimate more like 5.5 to 6 million species. But still, if we've only described 1 million, we have a long way to go discovering.
Wow.
So for comparison, there are only about 6,600 mammal species described, living mammals. That's including humans. Including humans, there's an estimated to be 1.1 billion tons of biomass as mammals. So like all the weight of all the mammals on Earth. However, the estimate for insects is 1 billion metric tons, which is yeah. So Google had these different measures of weight. However, it did compare that the equivalent to the combined weight of all the humans and livestock on Earth, so humans plus livestock, is similar to the weight of the insects on Earth. So that's absolutely mind-boggling when you consider the size of mammals and the size of insects, and the weight of all the insects is estimated to be about the same as the weight of all the people of livestock. Wow. Now, if you're afraid of insects, that's scary.
No, that's However, terrifying.
But when you look out your window, you realize the insects are tucked away in the trees and the ground. We're not just swarming with insects.
Huh. That's really cool. So there's like an equivalent mass, just sheer mass of insects is basically on par with humanity and every other animal.
And livestock.
Wow. That's so cool. Man.
A lot of bugs out there.
That kind of makes sense. Like, how many ants are in an anthill?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And you don't always see the anthill because it's underground.
Yeah.
You don't see how many bees there are because they're in a hive.
Huh. That's really cool. So I feel like I think you mentioned this earlier, a lot of people see insects as pests. But like from your perspective, what insects do you find amazing that people would consider to be a pest or consider to be a bug that, or I guess, what is an insect you find fascinating that most people would overlook or consider to be something that evil and they don't want it near them?
Oh, just any spider, really. Okay, obviously there are spiders that can hurt humans,
Hmm.
but most spiders will not bite unless provoked. Most spiders can't even bite through our skin, and a lot of spiders can't even hurt you even if they tried to bite you. So this is gonna freak people out, but like if there's a spider in my house, the only time I kill it is if it's something that I know can hurt people. But typically, I put it back outside, and the spiders outside are doing what they're supposed to do, and I'm not going to bother them, and they don't bother me. And even though spiders typically look what you would describe as creepy, um, they're still really cool. They're still very intricate and complex, and just really cool little critters.
Huh. What of the spiders are poisonous? Like, is the list small enough that you can name them off, or?
Oh, you'd have to look it up by region or continent. Australia is well known for having tons of things that can hurt people. Um, North America, there's black widows and brown recluse and other spiders that you don't want to get bit by, but we don't have quite the deadly things that, say, Australia does. So you'd have to look at that by country or region.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember actually just today there was Mark Rober had put out a short talking about how spiders' legs work like hydraulics, where they push blood through the legs and it makes
Oh,
them
very cool.
move. Yeah, and so you can simulate that by like pumping air into them, like even after they
Oh,
die.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was like super fascinating. Can you tell me a bit more about spiders? Is there anything? Is that part of what you study, like the
No,
internals
I
of,
didn't.
or okay?
No, I saw some dead ones that were just happened to be in samples that were collected. But since we weren't looking at spiders, they typically got thrown away. I don't know if we saved any of them, but since spiders aren't insects, it wasn't our focus.
Hmm.
Spiders are very cool, though. I do wish I knew more.
Hmm. Cool. If there was a, I guess, one message to get across the average person about insects, what would you say that would be?
The average person, I would say to look again at an insect and see it as something fascinating, not something gross. I just hope more people would come to appreciate insects and not just squish them all indiscriminately on site.
Hmm.
Yeah, because when you start noticing things, you'll see something you've never seen before. And that's interesting.
Hmm. What do you find most fascinating about bugs?
I think just the intricacy and complexity of the macro world,
Hmm.
they're just so diverse and beautiful under the microscope. I love looking through the microscope, seeing really up close at insects.
Hmm. What does a up close insect look like?
Oh, you could Google macro photos of insects or find a book. There's the book I mentioned called Bugs Up Close that has macro photo, really beautiful macro photos of insects. So up close, if you're looking at an insect under magnification, you're going to see all the little tiny hairs, all the facets of the eyes. You're going to see how the legs and antennae and maybe wings all connect. You're going to see the patterns, the texture patterns on the body of the insect. You're going to see the feet. The feet are pretty interesting. They're very different across different insects. You're going to see colors, a lot of insect colors look different with different lighting. So you can manipulate your insect under the light and see if the colors look any different. You can look at the parts that you normally wouldn't see with just your naked eye. So you could look at the mouth parts, see all the little tiny pieces. It's really wild when you look under a microscope.
Huh. That's really fascinating. All right. So I just got a fun question for you.
Oh.
Could we like get rid of all mosquitoes? I feel like they don't benefit society in any way, shape, or form. But perhaps you can enlighten me there. But like, can we do it if we just found a way to kill all the mosquitoes?
If they could all be eradicated. I had to look this up because I had some guesses, but Google told me more. So eradicating all mosquitoes, it would significantly impact food chains and food webs in ecosystems because so many different animals eat mosquitoes and rely on that food source. But there would be unforeseen consequences and impacts. So I really don't think humans could thrive, assuming that we're thriving right now. However, worldwide, that's different because, in other countries, the disease is spread by mosquitoes. People are not thriving. So Google did say that disease would be eliminated and improve and save lives if mosquitoes and disease were eliminated, or while the disease is carried by mosquitoes. However, the ecosystems, biodiversity, and pests would be greatly impacted. So that would be all thrown out of whack. They'd have to readjust. I would think that a lot of things would not be thriving because their food source was taken away. So there's just a lot of unknowns if you were to remove such a large part of the ecosystem. These annoying and harmful mosquitoes, they are important, as devastating to people as they can be. So even though we all wish mosquitoes wouldn't come and bite us, I think we're going to have to live with that and figure out other ways to mitigate harm.
Cool. You mentioned that you will sometimes show your kind of book of bugs to kids that you work with. What are some of the reactions you get from some of the kids?
I'm not sure if the book you're meaning is the book of photos that I have. It's not my photos. It's a published book. Or if you mean my personal collection of insects. However, when I do show either my personal insect collection or pictures of bugs up close to other people, whether that's kids or adults, they always have the reaction of seeing something amazing that they've never seen before. Their eyes are opened to a world that they've never really thought about. And then they always have questions.
What are some of the questions they ask?
Oh, man. I can't think of a specific one off the top of my head. It just leads to conversation, really. I think they often most ask, like, if it was just me who collected the insects, which most of them were me, but some of them were my family. Yeah, just commenting on the different insects. Just because just in my small personal collection, there's quite a variety. It's a good conversation starter in our house.
Nice. Do you have them like, is there just a book somewhere, or do you put them out on display? Like people walk in, there's bugs all over? Or
Yeah. They're on display in two, I'm going to call them picture frames. What they actually are insect specimen drawers, which is a wooden frame with a glass pane, so you can see the insects without risking bumping them or something. So it's like a shadow box, I think, is a good comparison. But it's not dark; it's bright white, so that you can see the insects pinned inside of it. I can send you photos if you
Yeah.
exactly
I
wanted
love
to see what I'm talking about. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Really cool. Do you think so? You've said like a lot of people have this fear of spiders, but most spiders aren't venomous. You obviously have worked a lot with bugs. Why do you think people are so afraid of these bugs that they see around? I feel like most people's reaction is sort of, at least my reaction is a runaway, smash the thing into bits. Your reaction seems to be
I
pick
get
it up
the,
and
yeah,
put it in a frame.
I get the reaction because, like, if I were to have a spider run across my arm, yeah, my first reaction would be to shake it off. I don't want it on me. I want it where I can see it, but I don't like the feeling of it on me. And of course, a lot of insects, mostly, especially spiders, just the legs, I think, creep people out. And sometimes just the whole spider itself can be freaky looking. So I get that people kind of freak out when they see them. And then people just fear the unknown. So when you don't know that a spider can't bite you or isn't going to hurt you, you're scared because you don't know and you just assume it will hurt you. Yeah, they're odd looking little things. So plus the way they move can be pretty freaky looking and unpredictable. So I totally understand why people are freaked out. I don't want a spider quickly running at me. I'm gonna back away. I'm gonna brush it off my arm if it's on me, but where I stop myself is I don't immediately squish it.
Huh.
I
Interesting.
need to see what it is.
Yeah, so sort of the fear of the unknown, like you never take a moment to think, oh, maybe this bug can't actually hurt me. Maybe it's just
Yeah,
crawling around
I
doing its
guess.
thing. And sort of the,
It's just doing its
yeah.
thing. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
my guess.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I know that I do construction,
Mm-hmm.
and we're at this job site. I have probably seen more bugs that I've never ever witnessed before in this one job site
Whoa.
in like the past 6 months that I have basically in my lifetime. Um,
Wow.
like I didn't realize that a grasshopper or a locust was a very large grasshopper, and I didn't realize how big they got. There was maybe you can tell me about this process. There was a video I saw of this guy somehow explaining like the more oxygen in the environment, the larger bugs will get.
I've kind of heard about that. Yeah. So I don't believe in millions of years or evolution. However, it there does appear to be evidence that thousands of years ago, um, the air quality, the air makeup was different than it is now, and so that's why fossils of very large insects are found. Um, so I think that is part of the guess why insects were able to grow so large is because of the different makeup of the air, different oxygen levels, concentrations. But I personally haven't read or researched anything about that, but I have heard of what you're talking about.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, but I didn't just realize how large insects were able to get. In the video,
Yeah.
the dude was showing a locust like the size of your hand. It was terrifying.
Wow.
The thing was like,
Yeah.
bugs should not be that big. I'm sorry. If it's the size, if it's like past the size of a mouse, no.
Fortunately, not that many insects get that big.
That's good. I'm very happy about that. But yes, I think one of my coworkers found uh, not the black widow, but the brown something
Okay.
on the job site. Like that spider did
Yeah.
appear. So that
Yeah.
was kind of cool. Nice. Well, if there's one thing you could leave everyone with who's listening, a piece of advice about bugs, or maybe a personal piece of advice you have, what would that be?
Oh, I'll just say it again. If you see an insect, look at it again and try to notice something you haven't noticed before. You might be surprised. You
Nice.
might find something fascinating.
Cool. And then can
And if
you.
you're
Oh, sorry.
oh, you're good. If you're able to find out what you're looking at, maybe online, you can look up some more facts about it, and you'll know a whole lot more than you knew 5 minutes ago.
Nice. And then could you say one more time the resources, like if people wanted to find more about bugs or look at the close-ups, can you tell everyone again
Yeah,
what
sure.
those resources were?
Yeah, so the book that I've mentioned a couple times, I believe it's called Bugs Up Close. Um, I would have to look up the author. Maybe I can find it right now, but it's just really beautiful professional macro photos of insects and bugs, um, showing you really cool details. I've also mentioned the app called iNaturalist, I as in iPhone, and then Naturalist. Using that app, you can figure out any kind of plant or animal that you've taken a picture of. You just input where it was found and the date when it was found, and you can do the species search, and the app will give its best guess what you have there, and usually it's pretty accurate.
Hmm.
Another website, or a website that I had not mentioned yet, is bugguide.net. And that's a good website for if you have a species that you want to learn about, you can type in the species, genus and species, or just a family of insects that you want to know more about. And you can look at pictures, you can look at collection data. That's a good resource. Yeah, I'm looking up the author for the Bugs Up Close book. I think I'm just going to have to go grab the book instead of trying to figure out a search phrase to figure it out. Yes. Janson. The text bars. Hudson. And photographs. You have shown. Not pronounced right. Not English. Maybe where the small characters go some of the vowels. It's a really good coffee table book.
Huh. And who was the author?
The sorry, get this away. So it has.
It's hard to. I can't really hear you from.
Oh. Sorry, I must have moved too far away.
You're good.
Okay. The text is by Lars Ek Jansson. That's Janzon. And the photographs are by John Hallman.
Hmm.
Hallmen. Bugs Up Close.
Huh. Cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, it could be at a library near you, or used or new online. But if you're interested in being interested in insects, it's a pretty good gateway.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I really appreciate you talking about bugs. It's super, super cool to see all the information you know and your excitement on the variety of insects that exist. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun. I'm always happy when someone is interested in learning more about insects and appreciating them. I really love when people just at least appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's more people who I think there's a lot of studies that people don't realize existed. Like I didn't even know there was a study of bugs until I was just looking at bugs and I was like, huh, I wonder if someone studies this.
Oh
And
yeah,
evidently there were.
there's
But
not that many people who do, but they are out there.
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and really
Yeah, thanks
really
so
appreciate
much.
you. Yeah.